Roll call, please.
Trustee Bree.
Here.
Trustee Hallwax. Trustee Rubin.
Here. Okay, so minutes. Oh no, public comment. Is anybody here for a public comment? I don't think so. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right, second. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Nikki, do you want to walk us through the monthly report?
Thank you. So before I get started, I just want to recognize Sam Chandler. He's our finance intern. We don't want to scare him tonight, but his career goal is municipal finance.
All right.
So no pressure, guys. On tonight's agenda, so we'll be talking about the March Treasurer's Report, going through the highlights on that. Margaret will give the Community Investment Program update, and then we're also joined by Brian Hextall, who's in the corner there. Brian, he will be reviewing our investment portfolio. Okay, so dive right in. We are already a quarter of the way through the year, if you can believe it. The highlight of the Treasurer's Report, or I guess what we've been talking about the most this year, is property taxes. We're still lower than this time last year by almost $200,000. We have 47% of the budgeted dollars, but if I back out that large dollar amount that we received in January, we're still shy by almost $2 million in revenue. We are expecting that in April. The reason that we are so far behind is because of that due date extension. It was extended till April 3rd. We have seen a large influx of property taxes this month so far, which is exactly what we would expect. We're almost to that 2 million mark. So we're almost whole from where we would have been otherwise. Moving on to sales taxes, we've seen a lot of fluctuation in this in the last 12 months. There is the chart in the financial report towards the end. I need a packet page number.
It's page 13.
Thank you. We've seen a lot of fluctuation up and down compared to prior years, which you would expect a little bit, especially post-COVID. But we are starting to settle around that 220, 230 a month mark, which is significantly higher than what we were pre-COVID. So that's good news for us on an ongoing basis. The month of March were sales taxes that were collected as part of December sales. And year to date, we're at just shy of 28% of budget, of year-to-date budget, which is a good position for us to be in. Other than sales taxes, our places for eating tax, telecommunications tax, parking fees, and vehicle licenses are all higher than this time last year, and they were all higher than budget projections. That's good news, especially with places for eating tax, since we did lose one restaurant in downtown, but we're still performing very strong compared to last year. On an expenditure level in the general fund, we are higher than last year, but only at 24.2% of budget. So we are within where we would expect in terms of budgetary projections. So that's good news as well.
I have just a quick question. I don't mean it to seem like a dumb question, but when I look at the general fund total revenue, and then I just kind of compare it, eyeballing it, it looks like it's up year over year, but then if you look at all the different categories, they look generally lower. So am I just missing something? Or?
There are a number of them that are lower.
Okay.
Overall, and since we're talking about it, I'm going to skip ahead real fast. We are still projecting a $2.4 million surplus with revenue coming in over budget. If we back that out without property taxes, 1.9 million. But there are several categories that are running
looking at the
more.
numbers adding up, I'm having a hard time. Like, if you just look at property taxes, 190 year over year down, and then general fund is still up 80. I just don't see 270,000 higher in the rest of the categories. I just don't know. Is it now rolling up? Or am I missing? So I'm just looking at the the high level
Page
one.
19.
Yeah, no, page 9.
So these categories, the ones that are listed here is not all inclusive of the general fund.
Yeah, I figured, but it still seems like a large number. I mean, again, you know, it could be, when I'm eyeballing these, I'm not coming anywhere near. That's just, year to date versus prior year to date.
You're not coming to the 2.4.
Well, no, what I'm looking at is 7.9 million for current year to date, just general fund revenue versus 7.8 million last year. But then if we look at property taxes, it's almost $200,000 below. State income tax is roughly the same. Sales tax is maybe 30,000 higher. Property tax, the personal property replacement tax is 15,000 lower. Permits 10,000 lower. I'm just not coming. It seems like there's a big difference in numbers.
So this projection is projecting out the full year versus.
I'm just adding up numbers.
Okay.
Just looking at top line relative to the subcategories. To me, they don't look like the same. And I could be, I'm only looking at that high level page 9, the green and blue box one.
So when I compare this to the financial projections that has every single revenue category, the summary numbers do tie to that. So I'd say we have a significant amount in other revenue. We don't have vehicle licenses covered here.
If there's an explanation, that's fine. I just didn't, when in these high level categories, there was a decent amount difference. So.
But those are, that's a good question and we can get a more detailed analysis.
I'm not looking to I just want to make sure that there wasn't some bug in there that
Yes.
didn't add up correctly.
But it does, at a quick glance, I'll double, triple check it just to make sure, but at a quick glance, it does look like it ties to the larger schedule.
The general fund is above, we've got the whole property tax, the timing of the property tax is off, but just when we're looking at the numbers, general fund is ahead year over year.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from you? So moving on to the water fund, there's not a whole lot to talk about here. Our volumetric revenue is much less than our year-to-date budgetary targets, but that's where we would expect it to be just because of the seasonality of water usage and irrigation. Fixed charge revenue is right on target and our expenditures are a little higher than this time last year, but that's in line with our budgetary projections. We do have some capital projects that are kicking off. And some larger operating expenditures that have kicked in already this year in the first quarter. On the golf fund.
I have one question, that's a digress. I have one question about water. So I forwarded an article to Phil earlier, just about, lead pipe replacement and money coming to the state. Are we?
Low interest loans are primarily what those are.
Yeah,
And
it's
we're
not actually just.
That's not grants,
money.
unfortunately, but we are gonna look at those as potential alternatives in the future. If those are, depending upon where the rate structures are for
Yeah.
those, we do have one existing IEPA loan for a large water main project that we completed in 2012.
Correct.
That's very, very low interest and may be good options for us on a going forward basis with that program as we
It looks like
continue
it's
through it. Yeah, unfortunately,
that's a
not.
big chunk of money. Okay.
It is a big chunk of money.
Well, right, but it's not,
Yeah,
not no strings.
correct.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's good questions. Okay, so on the golf fund, overall, our revenue performance is in line with expectations in terms of projections and the budget. Coming in slightly higher than last year. Again, similar to water, we're very early in the season, so we're not seeing anything remarkable here. But I will turn it over to Stella to talk a little bit more about operations and where we are.
Sure. The March weather was not very cooperative. We had 3 inches of snow March 10th and several huge rainstorms, but we pushed, we got open, we were able to generate 11,000 in greens fees. We budget for 14 days of operation in March, we only had 6. So it's always a really kind of an iffy month. The good news is our permanent tea time program, as I said before, we are above budget. We budget 260 and we have 270 in for the season. There's still availability for later tea times as well. And the Golf Academy, we introduced programming earlier this year for events, special clinics and the junior program. And the clinics are about 75% full already and the summer camp's at 50% and it doesn't start till June. So all good news.
Moving on to debt service, MFT, capital funds. This early in the year, expenditures in all of these funds are expected. The capital projects fund, the expenditures are just kicking off with the start of construction season. Similar to the general fund, the debt service fund is shy of property taxes. We do have a specific levy for our outstanding debt that's directed to the debt service fund. As of March 31st, we're shy about $600,000 when you back out what we received from the prior year levy. As of today, we've received about $400,000 in debt service, additional property taxes and revenue for that fund. So we're still about $200,000 shy. I would not panic at that moment because Cook County is very erratic in how they distribute property taxes to us. So we'll wait until the end of April to really take a look at that, what the impact is on the debt service fund. On a personnel level, our overtime remains elevated because of vacancies primarily in the public safety department. Our pension cost is also up. This is going up as the contribution increased year over year, and it also increases as we get property taxes in because there is a levy line that's specifically dedicated to that as well. Other than that, we do see the year over year increases that are consistent with the collective bargaining agreement and the cost of living adjustments that were approved as part of the budget. Revisiting this slide, we talked a little bit about the general fund. The water fund has a modest $13,000 surplus versus budget. And then overall, when we fold in expenditures, the general fund is looking a lot more optimistic because I programmed $2 million of revenue into April. That does look great because of all of the receipts that we received in January. We were planning for a $1.4 million deficit because of the timing of everything on a cash basis. It's going to be a $320,000 deficit. But as we talked, when we adjust everything at year end, those property taxes will come out. So we will be pretty close to where we were budgeting, targeting in the general fund. On a water fund basis, we're projecting a surplus that's due to the planned issuance of alternate revenue bonds that will happen. Those are tentatively planned for June. And then as of March 31st, we have unaudited figures. Our general fund's sitting at 58% of reserve, which is a great place for us to be. It's in excess of our budgetary target, as is the water fund at 37% of operating expenditures. And just a reminder, we are purposefully aggregating reserves in both of those funds to fund future capital projects. On the inflationary end, we don't have anything new from an operational standpoint to report, but I will say that our commodities are running higher than last year, and they're at 38% of budget. A large majority of this excess, even though we're 0.25% of the year, is timing. A lot of this is just commodities that we've purchased earlier in the year. Contractual services, very similar. They're higher than last year, but they are within budgetary projections. So at this time, we don't have any concerns about the village's ability to absorb the impacts of inflation. One of the things that we do talk about in the financial report is the pending increase in fuel costs and what that will mean for us. So that will be something that we'll likely report on in the coming months as we see those prices climb. On the equipment, we do have a few updates, and actually so recent that it's not even on this slide. We, as you recall, with the patrol vehicles, we had 6 included for this year's budget that we had ordered. 1 has been delivered, so we have 5 remaining. Today, we had a phone call with one of the dealerships that they have a number of vehicles on their lot, so we may be able to obtain as many as 4 right off the lot. So that's great news for us.
And we kind of pre-order, do we need all 5 this year? Wasn't it sort of, things were getting so backed up that we were looking out, if
We
they
haven't
give us 5 at
bought
once?
squad cars in 3 years, and so we're actually
We're
backslide.
behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a pleasant surprise because we knew we were gonna get 2. We didn't even know if we were gonna get the rest of them, so that's a good sign. On the Public Works Department, we had 2 leaf vacuums. If you recall, we ordered a leaf vacuum in January of last year that we never received. We are getting preliminary indications that we will receive that as soon as the end of this month, maybe early May. So that the payment for that vacuum will be on Thursday night's agenda, not for approval, but the check payment will be there. The second vacuum is tentatively anticipated in the 3rd quarter. So if that actually happens, that'd be great, just in time for the fall leaf collection. The other piece that we reported on last month, replacement of truck 3 or vehicle 3 in the water fund. Our Public Works Department just got lucky. They found a comparable truck sitting on a lot in Wisconsin. So that is also on a Thursday night's agenda for approval. So if that's approved, then we'll be hopefully getting that later this month as well. So all good news for once on the equipment and vehicles. Any questions before I go into bond issues?
Yeah,
Okay.
another one.
No, it's.
So it was a super mild winter. What happens to all the salt that we didn't use?
We have the capacity to store, if we load heavy into our storage, we get 600 tons out there. So the short answer is we'll store it, but it'll also affect and that'll be on Thursday night's agenda as well. Our allocation request for next winter will be, we tend to taper it down. We take into account what we have in stock.
Where do we keep
Yeah, that's out at the water tower site. We've got a cold storage building out there for it.
And that is scalable, Dave, right? So we only have to take a minimum order. We don't have to.
Yeah, there's different arrangements, and what you'll see Thursday night is we generally will do the 80-120 option. So we're committed to ordering 80% of what we order, and we can order 120% of it. So depending on what the winter conditions are, because try as we might, I mean, that's difficult to predict what the winter is going to be. So it gives us
Last
enough
year
flexibility.
and then this year. Get back to back.
It was fairly light on the salt usage this last winter. Yeah.
No, I mean, the two winter, that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't too long ago, we were looking for salt on the black market, essentially. We had to pay dearly for, 100 tons, in season late, because we hit 120%, and nobody had any, they weren't gonna extend it, so
what do we spend on salt?
100 grand, plus or minus, yeah.
Yeah, I think the contract on Thursday night's agenda is just over $100,000.
So the other item, this wasn't so much covered in the financial report because we are still waiting on certification results for the bond referendum, but it does, early indications do indicate that the golf referendum is passed. So we did want to talk about this with the committee this evening. So we did have the issuance of alternate revenue bonds planned in the water fund. We did pass in March a reimbursement resolution that allows us to recapture expenditures 60 days prior to the passage of that resolution, and any time after that will allow us to reimburse ourselves for any costs incurred from bond proceeds. That was approved in March, so the next step in the alternate revenue bonds is on Thursday night's agenda. There's an authorizing ordinance, which is the official action of the village board to authorize us to go forward with this process. And we'll also publish the notification of the BINA hearing, which is it's the Bond Issuance Notification Act. This is required for referendum or for alternate revenue bonds because you're not going to referendum. So we are required to notify the public that we have this indication that we're going to be issuing bonds. And there's a 30-day petition period that will start after the village board meeting that people are allowed to protest. In May, we'll hold the formal hearing for that BINA notice. And then we also have a tentative ratings call planned for that. All things going well, at that point, we'll plan for a competitive bond sale in June, and that will be presented for the village board's approval. Our proposal to the committee and to the village board is to roll these two bond issues together, the alternate revenue bonds and the GEO bonds. It would be a series A and B. This would allow us to essentially save costs on the issuance. We would only have to pay for one rating. We only have to pay our financial advisors one time. And that would be over the life of the golf issue, to the extent that we can roll it in, could be a 6-figure savings in terms of the cost of issuance. So it is a significant amount of money that we would save by rolling these in together. On the GEO side, the process is much simpler once you get through the referendum process. We don't have to do the hearing or anything else for those. In April, we're having this conversation to confirm the size of the issue, which I'll get to in a moment. The ratings call would be the same, and then June would be the bond sale at the same time. So the results of both sales will come before you for your approval. One thing that we wanted to talk to the committee about tonight is the size of the $3 million issue that we had programmed into the budget for 2023. We had added that at your suggestion, actually. And we were planning for a $3 million issue in 23, $7 million in 24, and then we had a kind of a placeholder for $5 million. The reason for that breakdown is that we are trying to stay under $10 million of GEO bonds each year. That allows us to maintain what they call bank qualified status, which gives you a preferred interest rate, which is really important in today's environment. If we can stay under 10 million, that would allow us to issue the 3 million this year. We have 3 million more that we have to issue next year. And that's the second tranche from the 2021 referendum bonds. So we issued 7 million last year. So we have the remaining 3 million from that. That allows us the 7 million there. So in 23, 24, that gives us 10 million to play with the thought being year 3, 25, that bond issue could be scalable depending on what is contributed by the Friends of Glencoe Golf Club. So really just looking for feedback from the committee on that thought process and the plan going forward before we kind of move.
I mean, if the savings is significant, that sounds exactly right. And wasn't there the timing of when the lease starts to with the debt issuance? Don't we want to push that out?
Yeah,
as
we've
far
got
as
time,
possible?
we've got time.
No, but I mean with Cook County.
Yeah, yeah.
So we want to delay at least as much, some portion of it, so we've got.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is it the last debt issuance or is it the first debt issuance?
I don't believe it's clear as to the exactitude of the timing of it, so long as there are issuances prior to the deadline date, which is December of 2024.
Okay.
So we would anticipate that next year's issue would likely be the
Set the
one.
date. Got it.
Yeah.
The timing of the 3 and the 7, the 3 certainly, but, we think we'll be able to do the 7. I'm assuming will be more than adequate in terms of, so we've got, our funding will be ahead of the expenditure.
Construction resources.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And we do have 3 years to spend the bond proceeds from the date of issuance. So that's also kind of the reason for the staggering to allow us time for construction if we run into an issue or more time.
I wouldn't anticipate construction is going to begin in any appreciable way until later in 2024. We have a long way to go before we get there, including getting the architects on board, which I'm anticipating bringing a contract to the board in June for that. And that, those will be expenses that initial tranche of bond resources would be available for, additional engineering costs, things like that. And then ultimately construction, those resources will be available once construction begins. Probably go to bid in the early summer of 24 is, if everything goes smoothly as we hope it will.
And with the debt issuance, are we adjusting the maturity schedule based on rates, or how are we?
We're working with our financial advisor to do that. We're trying, short-term rates are kind of
Right,
crazy
yeah,
right now,
the
yes. So
curves.
they are pushing the maturities out a little bit farther to bring the interest rate down. Ultimately, the structure of the bond issue will depend on the results of the auction. And we may have to restructure based off of the maximum par amount that's allowed by the board. So we did, I think, put in 4.7 as a maximum par amount just to allow, I'm sorry, that was on alternate revenue. We'll have to adjust the golf. We haven't decided on that dollar amount yet. Yeah, so we would have to adjust based off of the maximum allowable amount. If we end up getting a premium on the bonds, we have to adjust these.
Then is the bond issuance notification act hearing.
That will be at the May meeting,
So it's in our village board meeting.
yes.
It's exciting.
Yeah,
Looking
it's
forward to
super
getting this thing going.
Yeah. Let's see. My first day, okay. All right, we can move over to Margaret and get her CIP update.
Good evening. Your April CIP updates on page 47, 48 in your packet, and then the quarterly updates on page 49. Tonight, we just have a few target dates that have moved. The new downtown garbage and recycling cans purchase is going to be brought to the board for approval in May instead of April. The 16-inch water main valve replacement project is going to be brought to the board in June instead of May. The water plant parking lot resurfacing project is going to be brought to the board in August instead of April. And that project completion date will be adjusted accordingly from July to September. And I think Dave now can speak more to that in a moment. The traffic signal control modification project will also be brought to the board for approval in June instead of April. And so staff is available to answer any questions you have this evening.
So Brian, if you'd like to. So Brian Hexel's from PMA Asset Management. If you recall, let's see, it was in 2019, the village issued an RFP for investment advising services. We identified approximately $5 million in idle fund reserve cash that we could invest and safely continue operations. So as part of that agreement, we do try and bring PMA back periodically just to give the finance committee an update on the portfolio's progress. So I will turn it over to Brian.
All right, thank you very much, Nikki. And yeah, very good to be here. I can't believe it's been since 2019, but you know, you throw in a pandemic and it just throws off all the timelines. So very nice to have the opportunity to meet you here this evening. I was going to be joined by Courtney Sosby, as stated on here, but she gave me a call this afternoon, so she's not feeling well. So just get me today. Yeah, if we could go ahead. Just a real quick overview, since this is our first time meeting, I guess myself, I've been with PMA for over 20 years now. Started off doing credit research work, led our credit team effort for a number of years. Really for about the last 10 years, I've been an institutional portfolio manager. And what that really means is working with communities very much like yours, or at least other communities, and putting together investment plans, evolving those plans through time, and ultimately achieving some really nice results for our clients. So as a company, we've been around for just about 40 years now. In total, we're responsible for about $38 billion in client assets. Almost all of those are public entities. That is absolutely our focus. We're talking like 99% of our assets are with public entities. And then our registered investment advisor, who I work for, is responsible for about half of that, so $20.2 billion in assets under management. The next slide here, we're a company based out of Naperville, Illinois. We have business around 14 states in the country. Here in Illinois, we manage a fund and provide the marketing services to a fund called iPrimes. That's $1 billion in assets, 150 municipalities all over the state, mostly here in the Chicagoland area. Similarly, in the school side, we have a fund called ISLAF, $8.3 billion, 450 plus entities. So, absolutely a leader in the space here within Illinois, and I think just a lot of experience working with public entities. And our philosophy, I think, very much aligns with the public entities that we serve. We know in the public space, it's safety, liquidity, and rent yield. To us, that means putting together a process that really starts with research, multiple layers of risk management. Obviously, building diversified portfolios is a really key part of that. And then once again, ultimately generating value-added returns by sticking with that consistent process and philosophy. So, market update, from what I understand, this is a group of folks that's very in tune with the market, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but happy to answer any questions you have. I think as we, move in a few slides here and start looking at the portfolio, it's really massive, historic, whatever adjective you want to give to the increase in interest rates that we saw over the past 12 months or so, a 4.5% move. This chart goes back to 1990. So over 30 years, never have seen rates rise this fast, by this much and this fast in the past 30 years. So really, you go back to the very early 1980s, there's some similarities there. Financial markets were also quite a bit different at that time. So a really unique set of circumstances that we've gone through here. Really over the entire 3 years, 4 years or so since we've been working on this portfolio, but the past year in particular. Market returns, I mean, I think, I'll circle back to this in a moment again. A lot of red last year. I mean, it was a tough year with rates moving up that much, whether you're looking at bond market, the total bond market down 13%. I mean, that's a phenomenal number to see the entire bond market down 13%. I mean, we see years where, the S&P 500 is down 18%, as we saw last year. Pretty unusual on the bond side. But, the left column there, in the green consistently, and that really is our forecast as we move forward through the year, is that whether you're looking at the cash, short bonds, the entire bond market, US stocks, global stocks, looking like a much, much better year this year. So, we'll knock on wood for that. The Fed and inflation, obviously the dual mandate, price stability, maximize employment, doing real well on the employment side, if anything, a little bit too tight. I think that was already alluded to during the meeting here. But obviously the inflation front has been challenging. You got this kind of mix of opinions, trying to pull out lines here on the left side of the chart, but really evolving picture that we're seeing from the Fed in terms of what their expectations are for rates. Markets have a different opinion, at least this year. I think the one thing that's consistent, though, is as we move out into 24, 25, is the thought is that interest rates will move down. They're going to move down because the economy is slowing. And, ultimately we won't move past this period of higher inflation. But, this is going to be a bumpy year, I think. It's not going to be, totally smooth sailing here as we, try to move the 6% type inflation back down to the Fed's target of 2%. So still quite a bit of work to do on that front. Again, from an outlook perspective, absolutely tighter policy is slowing things down. We're seeing that. The Fed does appear to be nearing the end of its rate cycle. At least one more interest rate hike is expected here, but the market and does appear thinking by the time we get into the late part of the year here, the Fed could actually be cutting interest rates. These higher rates definitely increasing recessionary risks. The banking sector turmoil, I'll circle back to that in a moment here, but historically the Fed raises rates until something breaks. And certainly we did see something break with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and some struggles at a number of other banks here in the US and globally. It doesn't look like we're quite there yet, though, with the Fed. We still need to see things slow down a bit more. And that's why we say, a bumpy year is expected. The geopolitical risks certainly in tune. I mean, you can't, read the news without seeing something going on. A lot of these are very hard for us to wrap around our hands around and say, oh, we're going to manage risk of a war in Ukraine in a particular way, right? That's not really something that you can really actively take an approach on. The debt ceiling piece, though, this summer that's approaching, or maybe into the early fall, something that we can really more actively get our arms around and say, let's be cautious with Treasury purchases. Obviously, the U.S. government is going to repay their debts. There is some level of question in terms of how much the timing of that. If something matures here this summer, could something be delayed? So very active in thinking about that, talking with got public entities all over the state about that topic. Finally, I've said a couple of times bumpy path this year, but we think that's a bumpy path that ultimately leads to strong returns here across stocks and bonds. And I've mentioned stocks a couple of times. I do want to highlight for you all this portfolio, as allowed under Illinois statute, entirely high quality bond portfolio. We just obviously like to be looking at the stock market as a good future indicator of where things are headed. So, I'll pause there for just a moment and ask if there are any questions or thoughts just around markets or the economy.
That's really just a question in terms of, let's say they're not raising.
Yeah.
And you guys are just limiting treasury purchases?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing you say there is, I think this can have a lot more impact on everything, and not just treasuries. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If we don't come to kind of that 11th hour or 11:59 probably type hour agreement, I would fully anticipate the market will open up the next morning in a pretty ugly fashion. I would anticipate that a lot of congressmen would notice that very, very quickly in the morning, and you'd probably come to an agreement within a day or two after that. So while there'd be volatility across markets would be our expectation, the most direct impact would be if you actually own a treasury that was maturing on that day and you don't get the money back, and now you're waiting a day or two and figuring out what is the process for this. It's a I hate the word unprecedented, to be honest with you, but it would be a very unprecedented event. So how does that play out? That's why the caution is specific to U.S. Treasuries, because that's the only piece that Congress has direct control over is that payment. Other comments or questions? All right, let's turn into the portfolio. So as I mentioned, very high quality portfolio, all as allowable under the Public Funds Investment Act. That's the guiding statute here in the state of Illinois. The village's investment policy closely mirrors that act. So you can see the categories here, 35% U.S. agency issued mortgage-backed securities. And I'll just put in my quick 2 cents on this one is that still a lot of grimaces whenever I mention mortgage-backed securities, thinking back to the financial crisis. I always want to highlight to everyone that the types of securities we buy for our clients are not the ones that got in trouble during the financial crisis. Those were issued by the likes of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers and Countrywide and a whole lot of other companies that don't exist anymore. The securities we're buying were issued by and guaranteed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Not to say for those who followed that those two entities didn't run into their own share of troubles, but what has always been expected. And those companies, in fact, actually have a line of credit from the U.S. Treasury. They were fully supported, and all expectations are that they'll continue to be. Obviously, continue to watch, see how that evolves. 15 years, still no action with Fannie and Freddie in terms of resolving that. I don't think there's a whole lot of political will of touching that hot potato. But we certainly do watch it, and would never expect any action that would impact previously issued bonds. If they were to do something, it would most likely impact future issuances. So, been talking about this for 15 years. We'll keep talking about it, but really high quality paper and a piece that we like. We actually have just some agency issued notes. So Fannie, Freddie, FHLB. So those aren't mortgages, just actual debt issuances. So municipal securities, about 20% of the portfolio. U.S. Treasuries, another 15%. 7% exposure to corporates, and then just a really small amount of cash. Basically, that's just kind of coupons coming in and those reinvested.
Are the muni bonds, are they taxable?
Yeah. Almost always going to be taxable. Rarely you'll find a tax exempt issuance that kind of makes sense for a tax exempt entity to buy. Yeah. On the yield side, so like alternate revenue bonds, for example, a lot of times those will be issue taxable, right? So those can be a nice, something nice. Probably wouldn't buy these bonds just because, but anyways, that's sort of issuance. On the yield front, always comparing ourselves to our benchmark. You can see the benchmarks, the 1 to 5 year U.S. Treasury and Agency Index. A nice high quality bond index that's really reflective of the types of securities that public entities can buy. So that benchmark yield 4%, the portfolio 4.33%. So that extra 33 basis points representing the other high quality, somewhat higher spread paying securities like the allocations there to the mortgage backs, the municipals, the corporate securities. As far as duration goes, throughout the past year plus, we've definitely been short duration to our benchmark. We're always going to stay fairly close, but right now I would call that very tight, 2.5, 2.6 years. We've probably been running it more like 2.2 to 2.3 years. So like a quarter year short. When interest rates are going up and bond prices are going down, being a little bit short duration was helpful. When we do get to the performance, you'll see that we have in fact outperformed the benchmark over the last few years here. And in staying short duration was very helpful. Super high quality portfolio, double A rated. Diversification by maturity. This is a 1 to 5 year portfolio. Indeed, there are investments, basically laddered out between 1 and 5 years in maturity. That bell shape of the curve is really just the shape of the issuance in the market. So we're matching our benchmark pretty closely in terms of the duration profile. Seeking value, over time, the portfolio certainly evolved. When we first got started, it was very heavy treasury, but as you can see, as the treasury is the gray on the chart here, but as time went by, there was a period where we definitely were reinvesting into other sectors. Treasuries came down. We then later added back into that sector as conditions were evolving. We do have some corporates. We can see the holdings in the back, but a couple examples. Toyota, Walmart, these are, blue chip type names, highly recognizable type names. And then the municipal portfolio actually has, been a pretty good issuer through the pandemic. And we've picked up some nice taxable issuances. So, it's always evolving. We're not a real active seller. We'll sell from time to time. Generally, we're buy and hold. But, as things mature, just because the treasury matures doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go out and buy another treasury security. We're going to be looking across the allowable sectors, seeing what makes, the most sense for the portfolio. And then on the return front, so, a couple of things are going to stand out. Obviously, that trailing 3-year return or even the since inception returns, not a number to get real excited about here. I, really want everyone to focus on interest rates have moved up a lot. We're now reinvesting at rates around 5%. The portfolio yields 4.33%, much more attractive. And while these absolute returns are, on the low side by, I think, anyone's scale, I would highlight that on both a net and gross fee basis, we are exceeding that benchmark since inception by 30 basis points. So, the extra 33 basis points that we're picking up today in yield, ultimately that comes through in return. That's really been a pretty consistent story throughout time here. So, the recovery is happening very quickly. The trailing year return is now just barely negative, I'll call that. As we can see, the year-to-date returns already just through March here at 1.6%. So, we're coming back here. It's been a tough go. Started off in a very low interest rate environment, saw those rising rates, but I think that having this good plan in place, keeping this ladder moving, it's going to be something that I think really works out well for the village as we move forward here. And the next two slides just go through all of the holdings within the portfolio. You can see we've got a really nice accounting reporting platform. It'll slice and dice this portfolio any which way you want. But, a number of kind of our standard indicators here, I think the ratings, the coupon rate, price, et cetera, across the page here. So a few pages of holdings. Nothing in particular I would highlight that we've not already talked about here. And that really does wrap up my remarks. So, once again, just
You guys adjust duration much beyond just keeping it very tight to the benchmark. If you do.
I would say within about a quarter of a year, plus or minus. We're not going to swing for the fences here in these accounts. We can say, hey, if we would have really taken this thing down a year or down 2 years through the pandemic, obviously we would have performed better. But, do you get back in at the right time? When are rates moving? We've got rates jumping up and down by on a regular basis, moving up and down by 25 basis points intraday. What the hedge fund managers and such, and I don't know, maybe there's some in this room here, but take some of these bigger swings. That's not what we're about as a manager of public funds. We're certainly gonna take some strategic and tactical movements to shorten or extend duration, but we're not gonna move, a long way from it.
Would you ever tell us that we're using the wrong benchmark? If you had a very steep yield curve where 10-year bonds were at 7% and short were at 2%, would you ever recommend changing benchmarks?
Ultimately, what we would probably base that on is more the liability. So to the extent that we felt like, the reserves were extending, the crystal ball was clearing up even out a little bit longer. That's really what would drive the move, not so much a shift in markets, because markets are always going to move around. They're going to get steeper, they get narrower, and we'll tactically move, a little bit longer or a little bit shorter on duration within that benchmark, within kind of the strategy. Recommending a change in strategy would be more aligned with goals, needs, objectives of the building.
Do you ever meet with us about those? I don't remember. I mean, I know we did at the beginning, but I don't remember.
Yeah, so it's only been with staff to date, obviously, so
Yeah.
we've not all had a chance to meet, but yeah, I do speak regularly with Nikki about and her team with those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clear. Good.
Once again, sorry, I had a chance to meet. That's all right,
Yep.
yeah, okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thanks. That's it, right? Do we have any other items for discussion? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right. Thanks, everybody.